So in the first full year that I did Betfair trading, I had many ups and downs. I had some great months and I had some terrible months, and it was a mixture of many different things, and it was very difficult to know whether I was on the right path or not. And one of the problems came when I came round to the first winter that I'd done, and it sort of everything didn't seem to quite work the way that it had done. And I was thinking, oh dear, should I be changing tack, or what should I be doing at this critical moment? Because it feels like all of a sudden, everything that I'd done a few months earlier had just basically gone to pot. Now, the fact is, there is a really easy answer to why that is the case. It's something that happens as part of the trading cycle, and it's something that you should be aware of, which is why I'm going to discuss it in this video. I've been successfully betting and trading for over 2 decades. If you want more videos like this and you want me to describe more of what I do, then give us a like. If you want to talk to like-minded people, visit the BetAngel forum where you can do exactly that, but also visit our website where you can download a free trial of BetAngel. So I distinctly remember when I started trading horse racing that I went through several different phases in my first year. I sort of learned how to do it, then started to build upon that and become a little bit better, and then I sort of seemed to stall and things began to fall apart a little bit. And then I seemed to turn it around, and things started heading in the right direction again. Only to find that the following year, exactly the same sort of thing happened. And that was when I clocked that what I was looking at was the difference in the types of markets that I was actively trading. Because when you look at all different sports have levels of seasonality. If we look at the football season, the way that teams play at the start and the sort of opportunities you get at the start are very different from what you expect in the middle of the season, and especially towards the end. And it's pretty much the same in every sport. In tennis, we start with hard court tennis in Australia, then we go across Asia and into the clay season, and then we finish, then we go to grass, and then we finish on hard courts in the USA. So every sport has some level of seasonality that will radically affect the way that you trade. And in this video, I'm talking specifically about horse racing, because that will significantly change your approach to the markets. I'll come on to the specifics in a second once I've described exactly what you're experiencing. Because horse racing is sort of broken into 3 codes effectively. You've got national hunt, stroke jumps racing, you've got flat turf racing, and then you've got all-weather racing. And as the name suggests, all-weather racing can take place in pretty much all weather. And therefore that tends to take place over the course of the year. But if we dig a little bit deeper, I'll bring up a graph at this particular point, you can see that there are very defined cycles in terms of each of these particular codes of racing. So all-weather racing takes place throughout the year, but it dips a bit in the summer as the flat turf season takes over, and you can see that there's a huge spike in the number of flat turf racing that takes place during the summer. And you can see that jumps racing is predominantly an autumn and winter sport, and there is a little bit that takes place during the summer, but of course the focus on the jumps racing is running on softer ground over jumps, as the name suggests. So you tend to get these cycles that take place in each of the codes within racing, and that radically affects the way that you're expected to trade and the way that each of these markets behaves. So the favourite time of the year for me is the flat turf season. You get the first race that occurs in April, so you get a few sneaking onto the card in March, and then that runs all the way through until October. And the main characteristic of the flat turf season is just tons of racing all over the place, day and night, or I should say afternoon and evening. And as a consequence, this is one of the reasons that I like it, because there are so many races going on. You are bound to find a really good trade during the flat turf season. Once a month, I get an absolute crackerjack of a trade out of the flat turf, something, huge, massive, that I don't get at any other time of the season apart from those big feature meetings. And you also find that the way that the markets work will feel different as well, because you've got all of these races going off one after another quite quickly. And so the money rushes into the market and you can get quite big sudden moves, which is pretty useful for trading, really. If you can catch one of those positions as it's about to move, then you can get to see quite a big move. And the reason that another big benefit of why it's useful to trade is because the races only last a short period of time. Typically, a 5 furlong race will take a minute to win it, as they say. You get much longer on the market, so you can assess the market in more depth. You can sit and watch the market for a little bit longer. and the money that's coming through the market will be steady and consistent for a short period of time. But there will be reasonable amounts of money. You get more money turned over on flat turf races than any other type of race, especially around those big meetings. The first classic of the year is the Guineas. No, actually, we've got the Lincoln, then we get the Guineas, then we get the Derby, and there were big feature meetings taking place all the way through the flat turf season, and then it finishes with a bang with Champions Day at Ascot in October. But basically, it's my favourite time of the year. The markets are readable, you get longer on the markets, there's more volume in the markets, they come over a reasonable period of time, and they're just nice markets to trade. And because there are so many meetings taking place, especially during peak season when you've got racing, maybe 3 meetings in the afternoon and 3 in the evening, you're just bound to find some really good trades in there. You can skip a few races and you don't have to worry about that, because that wonderful trade that you're looking for is right around the corner. So the all-weather racing can take place over the course of the entire year, fairly obviously. But you tend to, so sometimes you can get it mixed in with some jumps racing in the afternoon. Sometimes it's on its own in the winter, in the evening, because of course you can't have jumps under floodlights on all-weather tracks. So as a consequence, you tend to find that it's dominant during the winter period and a little bit quieter in the summer when the flat turf season takes over. And there are 2 characteristics to trading all-weather racing, and that is if it's thrown in with the jumps racing, you may find that the jumps races sort of clash with the all-weather racing, which isn't ideal. But you tend to find that in the evening, when you've got all-weather racing, you could have half-hour gaps between races. So all of the money that's due to arrive in that race, all the decisions that people are making around betting, sort of dribbles into the market over a period of time. And a dribble is the right word, because we've looked at the flat turf season, like all the money rushes in and like makes its decision in 5 or 10 minutes. So if you spread that volume out over the course of half an hour, then the net effect is that there's less money going into the market, but it probably matches a reasonable amount over that half an hour, but the individual liquidity is lower. And by liquidity, what I mean is the amount of money that's trading in and out of the market per second, because that's part of the equation you have when you're trading, is you want to be able to get out of a position if something has gone wrong. So you have to lower your stakes or raise them according to the liquidity. So all-weather racing that's taking place with half an hour gap should force you to lower your stakes, because that means that if you've made a mistake, you can get out of your position quite quickly. Whereas if we look at that in comparison to flat turf racing, there's loads of money coming in over a relatively short period of time, but a reasonable amount of time, definitely less than 30 minutes. And as a consequence, that sort of compresses the liquidity, and you get higher liquidity and you can use bigger stakes. So yeah, the all-weather racing is useful to have in the winter, but you're never going to make as much as you can on the flat turf because there are just fewer races. And as a consequence, the liquidity is lower and the opportunity is slightly lower on all-weather racing, and it doesn't tend to be as higher quality apart from some of the feature meetings. So yeah, it's similar but not quite the same as flat turf racing. And then, of course, we have the jump season. You tend to find that the jump season has significantly fewer races because, of course, they don't race in the evening. But also you have this issue whereby if the weather's, if it's too hot, too cold, too frosty, too snowy, too wet, too dry, low sun, you tend to run into these problems where meetings don't go ahead. So you get substantially fewer meetings during the winter. And this is one of the things that I sort of saw in that first year of trading. That was affecting my overall return, and it was nothing actually to do with me. It was a characteristic of the market. But also when you look at the jumps racing, the big difference between jumps racing when you're trading pre-off and the flat turf or even the all-weather is the amount of time you get to look at the market. Because very often, they're running for about 4,000 hours. And by the time they finish, the other race is about to start, and therefore you've got such a small amount of time for that money to arrive. It's very difficult to know if you've got a decent trade or not. You're looking for nice gaps where you can actively look at the market and assess where the money is and then actively trade it. But if there isn't much time, that makes it hard. And even worse is when races clash, because then they destroy each other. If you've got this much to be traded on one race and this much to be traded on another, when they clash, they just bump into each other and you don't get an increase in volume on one or the other. It actually is subtractive. So, this race will ruin the next race because it will suck money out of it. People don't know what the result of that previous race is. They won't bet on the next race. I know that sounds simplistic, but that is true. That's the way that these betting markets work. So yeah, you should expect, if you're trading pre-off, to do much worse during the winter and have fewer opportunities, and the opportunities won't come round as much as they should do. But also you tend to find the sort of quality of the races, the field sizes are smaller, there's less prize money. But of course that all leads up to Cheltenham, which is absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favourite meetings of the year in mid-March. And that is, you know, the pinnacle of the entire season. So I suffer in January, and usually February is my worst month of the year in terms of either turnover or profitability on pre-off horse racing. And then we get to Cheltenham, and you know, you get that nice big boost in the middle of March, and then we sort of roll over into April, where we get the Aintree Grand National meeting and the Sandown Jumps finale, both of which are decent meetings in their own right. But yeah, jumps racing trades radically different from turf racing, and what you tend to find is, because there's less racing, there's less meetings for weather reasons, and there's smaller fields, and very often these races clash, the number of opportunities that you get to do quality trades just diminishes. So you're better off sort of accepting that and not panicking too much about it, because of course your focus is then on Cheltenham, and as we move into April we've still got some good quality jumps, but the flat turf season comes back online. So yeah, set realistic expectations when you're looking at different parts of the year. And if you've just started out, it's good because everything gets better from here. But if you started out at the end of the flat season, you'd sort of be plummeting into the harder part of the year. But yeah, that's the jump season for you and how that would affect your trading. So you need to be aware that seasonality will radically affect your pre-off horse racing trading. It will be strong at certain times of the year, weaker at other times of the year. Favourable conditions will be found at certain points, and you'll be able to find more opportunities somewhere, and that will affect the way that you trade. It will affect the level of turnover in the market, how liquid each of those markets is, and ultimately it will affect how profitable you are. If you're trading at certain times of the year, it may seem harder than others, and that's not anything to do with the strategies that you're using. It's just that the markets aren't going to behave exactly the same way. The way I modify my strategies in the winter is I tend to very often look for just quick in and out trades, because looking for slightly longer trades will only work if I have a big enough gap between races, if I've got a decent amount of time between races. But also I tend to lower my stakes a little bit when the liquidity isn't there. That's one of the ways that I stake when I go up to market, is I'm always focused on, you know, if everything goes wrong, can I get out relatively easy, like within a tick or two? And if you overstake at when markets are lower, exhibiting lower liquidity, you'll struggle to get out and you'll push the price against you, which obviously won't be very beneficial to your P&L. So it's very important that when you look at each of these races at different times of the year, you recognize that they are going to have different trading styles, and depending upon when you started trading, or whether this is your first or second year or whatever, you'll notice that this cycle becomes part of the mix. And I don't really, it doesn't matter how hard I work in February, I'm not going to make the same amount that I would in March or in April or in June. It's just not going to happen. So I sort of set my expectations realistically. And in fact, I typically tend to holiday in late January, early February, because that's a low impact time of the year for me. But I can't do that, say, during Royal Ascot week, because that would kill one of the biggest months of the year for me. So it's important to reset expectations, but I'm happy to let a lot go in the winter. The first time that I traded during this particular time of the year, I sort of thought that maybe I'd lost my edge or the strategies weren't working any longer, but no, it was just a response to the way that the markets work. So yeah, take that into account, use that as some motivation in terms of where you're at within that particular cycle and what you can do with your time during that particular cycle, and take on board some of the advice that I've given you there in terms of the way that the markets work and how they're shaped as we go through that year. Anyhow, I hope that video has been useful for you.